Thank you, Mr. Chairperson, Mr. Deputy Mayor, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. Everything has been said. I'm tempted to say we can wrap up and move for lunch, but as everything has been said by these excellent presentations we have heard. You will find my paper in this booklet, which has been well prepared by the organizers, and Anselmo too he's a very excellent organizer, and we see that all the presentations are there in the booklet. So my task will be made easier, and I shall refer very briefly and quickly to the points which I have made in my paper. As you know, and as we said yesterday in the workshop, the advisory committee of the Human Rights Council has been entrusted to produce a research-based report on local government and human rights. And what we find to be our mission is to convey and achieve international recognition for all the good work that has been done by you in different meetings concerning the rights to the city, and perhaps ultimately convince the Human Rights Council, and which will then transmit it to the General Assembly, that perhaps the rights to the city can become a human right, whether it is a third generation human right or a fourth generation human right. Now, the points that I have covered in my paper is how to translate this right into to the city into local policies. And I have enumerated 9 points. One is human rights education. Secondly, we have the use of financial resources. Thirdly, accessibility. Fourthly, information and freedom of information. Fifthly, complaints mechanism. 6, good governance and the elimination of corruption. 7, the right to a clean environment. 8, eliminating class distinction within the city. And 9th, the relation with central government. Now, I hope I'm not going to create any difficulty for the translators, but I'll move immediately to paragraph 5 of my presentation. And this is the emphasis on human rights education. You may know that the United Nations General Assembly has adopted in December 2011 a declaration on human rights education and training, which was prepared by the advisory committee to the Human Rights Council. And we believe that the implementation of this declaration will require great effort initially, but subsequently it will become a smooth running operation. And using this declaration as far as training of local government councillors, local government officials is concerned, will greatly help to translate the rights to the city into a human right and into a reality. Secondly, financial resources. Putting into place human rights policies depends a lot on the availability of financial resources. There are 2 American professors called Cass Sunstein and Holmes who have written an excellent treatise on the cost of rights, which was published by Norton Paperback in the year 2000, to show the extent to which authorities have to raise money through taxes to provide adequate services, hold elections, maintain law and order. And the problem which is encountered by local government, we all know, and this has been stressed by the presenters, is to find adequate financial resources to implement human rights policies. And we know that because of the economic crisis which has hit most parts of the world, especially in Europe, many central governments have restricted funding towards local governments. Even last week, we've heard that this has happened in France because of local difficulty, where the central government is restricting the channeling of funds to local government. Furthermore, there is a problem when national politics interferes into local politics. That is, instead of letting local government function on its own, Parties in power at the level of national governments tend to interfere in local politics and thus impede the implementation of human rights policies. This happens all over the world where national parties put their own candidates at the level of local politics. Thirdly, I've talked about accessibility. There must be a policy of equal opportunity when it comes to implementing the rights to the city. This reminds me of the policy towards immigrants. In many countries, a policy is adopted to encourage migrants to adopt the culture of the receiving country. This has not worked. Now it is accepted that migrants or migrant workers can continue to practice their own culture and that the city must provide opportunities to better assimilate them. When they are allowed to preserve their cultural identity, it does not mean that they will not become good citizens. On the other hand, the human rights in the city must try to eliminate ghettos and not put migrants in those ghettos, in those deprived areas. Fourthly, I've talked about the freedom of information. It is important that every citizen should have access to information so that he can benefit from his rights. And thus, cities must make information readily available, encourage participation at all levels, with men, women, elderly people, children, and disabled people being made to play a useful role. In many cities, we have what we call citizens' advice bureaus, which are there to impart further information. Citizens must even be encouraged to attend meetings of the City Council, which are generally held in public, to ascertain how far their councillors are taking into consideration human rights when they are conducting debates. Then, fifthly, complaints mechanisms. This has been stressed upon already. We can have ombudsman, we can have a local human rights commission, and we know that it is difficult to have justiciability of economic, social, and cultural rights. So the best way of achieving these rights is through conciliation and mediation by local government human rights commissions and by ombudsmen. I've mentioned very briefly at point 6, good governance versus corruption, because even, unfortunately, at the level of local government, there can be corruption in many cities, in many countries, and this defeats the purpose of the right to the city. As the seventh point, there's the environment. Stress must be laid on the right to a clean environment, which at first was seen as a third-generation right and now has moved to the forefront. We know that the earth must not be a place entrusted to us for children, for generations to come, but also for us to enjoy in our old age, since now people live longer. And as shown in these images about housing, about slums, etc., a degradation of the environment is a danger to the city and is a danger to the right of the city. Proper planning and zoning is important to make the city a proper place to live in. As a last but final point, I've mentioned eliminating class distinction, and in one of the papers presented, reference has been made to David Harvey, and I mentioned yesterday in the workshop that he's just written a book called Rebel Cities, From the Right to the City to the Urban Revolution, where he advocates, or he describes that the struggle against capitalism can start in the city. But perhaps at the level of the advisory committee, this is not the approach we want to adopt, where we put cities in opposition to local government. But what he says is that there is much capital accumulation in cities where financiers and developers control access to urban resources and gather immense wealth. On the other hand, many people suffer and become poorer, so that the city becomes the place for class struggle on the lines of what we've seen last year in Occupy Wall Street. And this argument about the rich becoming richer has been developed recently in a book which is now famous by the French economist Thomas Piketty, which is entitled Capital in the 21st Century, which also shows how in cities especially and all over, the rich are getting richer because they control capital. So what municipalities must avoid at all costs they must avoid creating class distinction in cities so as to enhance the basis for social and economic equality. And the final point I've made is relations with central government, where local government councillors and parliamentarians must meet on a regular basis to exchange ideas, and where local government councillors can convince the parliamentarians, members of national assemblies, that their objective is similar, that they are working for human rights, for the betterment of the citizen. And in conclusion, I've quoted some paragraphs from the European Charter for the safeguarding of human rights in the city. I'll just mention one paragraph very briefly. The city today is home to all kinds of assemblies and above all a space for personal development. At the same time, it is the locus for contradictions, conflict, and danger. The urban space, with its anonymity on the one hand, is a source of all types of discrimination rooted in unemployment, poverty, and disdain for cultural differences, while simultaneously municipal and social practices are appearing which more and more build on the principle of solidarity. So there is hope for the future, and in our work at the level of the advisory committee, we are going to describe all the challenges which face the right to the city and all the best practices and recommend to the Human Rights Council that the way forward is to create this right to the city. I thank you for your attention.